Step one of the instructions, step 1 and 2, we're making 2 strip sets out of the long 2-inch strips. So you're gonna stitch fabrics H and O together. So that's this, the floral and then the oatmeal colored beige one. So right sides together. And then you're going to stitch 1/4 of an inch on one side of it. And then the next step is also another strip set, which is the floral again, fabric H, and then you're going to stitch it to L. So 1/4 of an inch on that end also, just like the first one. And then we'll come back and we'll press it, and it says to cut them into 2-inch wide pieces. I went ahead and pressed these. The directions say to press the fabric away from fabric H. On this strip set with the light and this one, you're going to press it away from the floral, which is fabric H. And the other strip set, you press it away from fabric L, which is the darker fabric. So... and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut them into 2-inch strip sets. So I should get 8 out of each strip set. And then we'll go back to the sewing machine and match them up with the other blocks. All right, so now we want to match these up. And what we're doing is making 3.5-inch squares out of them. So we're going to match these 8 blocks up with this 2 by 3.5-inch piece. All right, and when you're done, you're going to press that seam again away from this print fabric, and the other one's the same thing. You're matching these up with these, pressing away from the dark fabric. This is fabric L. So when you're finished, you should have 8 3.5-inch squares, both of them. So I went ahead and I pressed them according to the directions, pressed this seam away from the blue block in this direction, and then this one also away from the corner block. So the next step was to turn it over and mark a diagonal line from corner to corner. And I used a friction pen, but you could use a pencil. Let me find one that's easy to see here. So you want to make sure when you draw the line that your line intersects right on that X. All right, so I imagine when we sew it on, we'll sew 1/4 of an inch when we get to, but that's the last step. So I think we're going to put these aside after we mark all of them. So all 8 of these need to be marked. And then the 8 of these also need to be marked. I found that when I marked them, that it was easier to see that seam and get it on the correct side of that X if I laid the ruler on this half and then mark on the top of it. All right, so then we'll move on to the next step. Step 6 says we're going to stitch unit N to unit J. So there should be 8 of these unit N's. The J's, there were 16 of them, so I went ahead and counted those out. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to stitch these together, so it'll go right side together, and then you stitch 1/4 of an inch here. All right, and then we'll come back and we'll do the next step. All right, so the end of step 6 said to make sure that you press the seam towards the rectangle. So I've pressed them this way. All right, and then step 7 is the same thing as 6, but it's fabric P and fabric M, and you should have 8 of each one. So again, fabric M had actually 16 units. So I went ahead and split them, and I sewed 8 and 8, and then you're going to press the seam again towards the rectangle. Step 9 says we're going to sew fabric J, the 2.5-inch rectangle, to unit 2B with the upper edge even. There's going to be an overhang on it. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to press it away from the small block. So this piece is going to get sewn on this edge, matching this seam up here. So you'll sew here 1/4 of an inch, and then when you're done, you're going to press it away from the block. All right. So this is what the unit should look like at this point. And then next you're going to add the unit U3A. All right, so that one's going to go up here, and you're going to, again, you're going to match up this, the corners over here, and you want to nest these seams when you do your 1/4 inch seam, and it's going to overhang a little bit. I just went ahead and I stitched past it and chain stitch all 8 of them. But when you get to this point, you want to make sure that you're nesting your seams. And when you're done, if you nested them properly, you should have really good clean points here. And then again, you'll press out. You're going to keep pressing out on this. So this unit, it's the, what we're getting at is this half of the block. So we're here at this point. So we're going to keep going until we get there. And then you'll have these stair-stepped edges until step 9, where we will, I think we go in and we trim them off, but we'll get to that when we get there. All right, the last one is to match up the block you've been working on, and then the rest of the piece is U3B. All right, and then you're just gonna stitch it on this end, and you want to be really careful again and nest those seams here. And then I kind of like take my time and make sure that the other seam is going the right direction as you're stitching. Step 9 says to draw a diagonal line from corner to corner on this piece. U4, I believe, is the number for this piece. So I went ahead and I drew a diagonal line, and it said make sure that your line intersects the inner corner of this X right here. I don't know if you can see it. Mine's a little bit on the inside, so when I stitch that, I'm going to try and get it to where it's right at the X of that. So I'll bump my stitch over a little bit. So anyway, it says that the piece that you're matching it up with is a little bit oversized. That's the triangle that we cut in the very first step of the cutting instructions. It's oversized, and so it will extend about 1/2 inch on each side. This side's a little bit less than 1/2 inch, but it's all right. All right, so I went ahead and I pinned this because since both pieces are kind of a bias cut, I didn't want it to stretch and shift. So I went ahead and I pinned it in place. And then I'm going to go ahead and you're going to stitch on the line, and then remember to kind of hit that right at the X and then stitch to here. So then you're going to trim it to 1/4 of an inch and press it open. But I wanted to show you the other side of it, and the reason I said to hit that right on the X. So this one, you can see I didn't lose any of my points. These seams were nested, and then this is where that where you're aiming for, so that you don't miss that point. 2 of mine, I went ahead and sewed most of my blocks, but 2 of mine I did lose the point here, and I could go back and take it out and stitch it a little farther over, but in the grand scheme of the quilt, I don't think you're going to notice it, so I'm going to leave it. All right, so the last step in the process is to take the little block that was left over. I believe it's U2A, and then you're going to situate it here on the corner of the quilt. All right, and then you're going to stitch on that line. And again, you want to make sure that you aim for the X so that you don't lose this point in the corner. So stitch on the line, and then we're going to come back and trim it at 1/4 of an inch and press it out. All right, and that should finish the block. And then I think there should be 8 when we're finished. All right. I went ahead and I pressed the blocks. So you can see I didn't lose my corners. I went ahead and I trimmed the dog ears off of it just to clean them up a little bit. I found that mine didn't need to be resized. The block size was supposed to be 9.5 unfinished. Mine were barely 9.5 inches, so I don't know why I didn't have access to trim them up. But anyway, they turned out nice. And then all my scraps are in here. I took the corner pieces that I cut off of here and just turned them into a half square triangle for my mini quilts later. And that's it. So I'll see you next month.